Hello and welcome to Sriram IAS. You all are welcomed over here in this discussion of Indian economy. The book by Sriram sir himself. We are discussing this book from page to page and cover to cover. I would say there was a pause in this series and there have been already multiple lectures which we have covered. Now we have reached the 5th chapter, the industrial policy, meaning and the evolution of industrial policy. Now if you see and look at the index of this book, the 6th chapter, that is the industrial policy. After this there is the pandemic and Atmanirbharta. Now these are two chapters. Why do we need to understand them right over here and then go back to fiscal policy and monetary policy? There is a logic behind this, and the logic is very simple. When you understand what is growth, when you understand what is development, when you also understand that how India planned its 5-year plans and how India traveled from 1951 to 2017, you must also understand that India traveled not only in terms of developmental plans, but also along with the developmental plans, there were industry related plans also. There were FDI, or I would say external sector related developments also. So the first thing which we will be doing today is a chronological analysis that how actually the legislations regarding industrial policy changed and how the legislations regarding trade policies changed. How we liberalized trade and how we liberalized economy, how we liberalized the industrial sector. Understood? Simple. That is the first thing. And once we understand this, then only we will see that what, when and why did the events occurred in the industrial journey from 1951 to 2017 and 2023. After this, we will also see that since 2017 or 2019, we had an era of COVID, we had an era of degrowth of -24%. We recovered from that and currently we are expecting a growth of 6.6% in the next fiscal year, or I would say next financial year, that is FY27. Okay? Understood? Now let's understand first why do we need an industrial policy and how did the industrial policy actually evolve. So India's journey started with the colonial era. We had colonial government, we had the government which was actually in the pursuit of degrading the Indian industry. And you remember that India once used to contribute around 20% of world trade. And this decreased to just around 2%. Do you understand that? There were import barriers, there were export, I would say, barriers which were imposed on the finished goods which used to export from India. There was only one thing, or I would say one-way trade, that the goods from Britain will come into India and the bullion of India, whether that is gold, silver or precious gemstones, they will go out of India to Britain. Yes, the thought was somehow influenced by the thought process of wealth of nations, or I would say to accumulation of wealth of the nations. That is one thought. And the second thought was to generate more and more revenue, to increase more and more exports and to increase and to decrease more and more imports. That was the policy which Britain actually pursued. And in such, I would say, in such a mindset, it was said in the traditional economics, it is said that trade is a zero-sum game. That is, one's export is another's drain. Why so? Because say Britain is exporting their goods into India, it means that it is also taking money out of India to Britain, which means that the money or the currency is flowing. Say, when UK is exporting goods into India, it is also taking bullion or say rupees or dollars or euro or pound sterling, any of the currencies, it is taking it away from India into European Union or into UK, say Britain. Simple. Now what actually happens is the money which India sourced from different areas, say India increased its taxation, Indian government, India took a loan from another country, say a loan from Japan. This loan, which otherwise should have been in the Indian domestic currency, is going and settling into UK, which means there is one problem. What is that problem? That there is a leakage. When we say imports into India, it is an export for UK, but it is an import for India, and this will lead to what? Leakages. Leakage of what? The cash, the currency, the money which was otherwise in India, which would have increased India's multiplier effect, is now decreasing. So that is why we need to develop our local industry, we need to develop our own domestic economy, and once we do that, that is the only way we have self-reliance. Do you understand this? Simple? Sure. Now, moving further. So the challenge at independence of India was to rebuild India from scratch. Now, how can we build India from scratch, or what policies did we adopt to build India from scratch? Because at that point of time, I already mentioned this thing that Britain, or I would say colonial forces, they actually drained all the wealth from India. So 2 centuries of British rule systematically de-industrialized. This keyword of de-industrialization of Indian industry was asked by UPSC in mains, leaving behind a meager industrial base and underdeveloped entrepreneurship. So India faced a monumental task of re-establishing itself as a modern economy. Now, starting from 1947, what India first did and then how it traveled forward. So the first thing was to increase the ownership of a government. Why? Because we had, do you remember second 5-year plan? It clearly mentions that we had the socialistic pattern of society. We had the socialistic pattern in our development, in our growth, in our society, in our economy. Now, due to socialistic pattern or due to socialism or Nehruvian socialism, I should call it, Nehruvian socialism, which was somehow more inclined towards having government more share into governance, or having government more share into public services, welfare, everything, and growth also. Simple. Now, when we had this era, 1947 to 1970, we witnessed that public sector enterprises, or I would say all the government controlled regions or all the government controlled enterprises are not working that much effectively as should have been. And there was also one more event in the international economy, that was the failure of USSR, failure of Soviet Union. Now, once the socialistic ideology was de-influencing or was seen to be with the skeptical lenses by the world, at that point of time, capitalism was providing us another alternative to which we should look for growth. Because in this era, you should also remember that India was witnessing the Hindu growth rate. So that is why we thought that let's explore the free market economics. That is why in 1970s, in 1970s, post 1970s, the free market development started, but limited free market development. We let the small scale industries to prosper a bit. We let the private sector to have smaller share in multiple, I would say, enterprises. We asked private sector to have licenses. 1910, 9, and in this era, 1970s, 1970s, we had around 9 licenses, I think the number is right, 9 or 19 licenses were deregulated, or there was de-licensing which started. That okay, now you need lesser licenses to have your enterprise working. Simple. In 1980s, there was partial decontrol of government. What is partial decontrol? That government will start paving way for private sector, that okay, now private sector can do this also, they can go for coal mining also, they can go for oil refineries also, they can go for multiple other ventures. Then since 1991, the decontrol and de-licensing reforms started. That we will now start de-licensing. That there shouldn't be any license Raj. Abolition of license Raj, abolition of MRT establishment, or I would say enforcing or enactment of MRTP Act 1969. Post this, further acceleration of reforms and creating the free market economies since 1991 onwards, and decreasing the role of state in terms of industrial development. Now that is just the chronology, and that is how we traveled from one era to another era to another era to another era. Simple? Understood? Further, in terms of trade policies, that is import and export, government also had an apprehensive stance in the initial times. From 1947 to 1970 onwards, we were more, I would say, inclined towards developing our own economy, being more resilient, being more self-reliant, and more apprehensive towards imports. So therefore, there was total import control. There were only the essential goods and the goods which were allowed by Directorate General DGDT, that these items only will be traded or will be allowed to be imported into India. Not all the goods, not the free trade, any good, any labor or any service can be imported from outside. That was not allowed. Trade was totally controlled. This also designated authorities for the imports. There were designated authorities, that only these authorities will approve that whatever we need to improve, or if you need to say import, say for example, you need to import these earphones, or you need to import this mouse from China or anywhere, this must be approved by appropriate authorities, then only you can import it. Post this, from 1970 we started the reforms, the era of reforms, that is imports were started to liberalize, and indigenous, there were two things. One was indigenous goods, they were also required for clearance, and all these indigenous goods were now removed, that there was no clearance which was required for indigenous goods. Further, open general license, these were also issued. Import was further liberalized, and there was phased import substitution. That okay, if you want to import it, now we can go for it in 1980s. And post 1991, we had totally free trade and free market. There was one thing which you should remember, that in 1991, EXIM scripts were issued. Now, what does this mean? That is export-import scripts. What are scripts? Script is just a receipt. Script is just a receipt, that okay, if you are exporting this good, and you paid a tax of, say for example, you had to incur a tax of, say for example, 1,000 rupees on exporting this good, say this remote. Now what will happen is, you will be given a receipt, a tax receipt, that okay, you have paid 100 rupees of tax or 1,000 rupees of tax to the government on the export of these goods. Now understand that when I pay tax to the government is more it is more beneficial for the economy that I pay 1000 rupees to the government or I pay 1000 rupees to the private sector. Now, if you understand this, you understand the whole economy, that what we are actually doing in terms of trade. And that is what we are doing currently also. It is the same thing. Say a person A exports, then you will understand RoDTEPs, you will understand GST, IGST, you will understand every reform in the taxation of exports. A exports remote controls which are made in India to Africa. So, as a nation, what do we always aspire for? We always aspire to increase our exports. The only condition is that the increase of exports should be sustainable enough. Sustainable enough means that if we are increasing the agricultural exports, for example, we are increasing the export of onions and we do not have onions at our home, that export should be restricted. We are exporting pulses and we are not left with enough pulses at home, that export of pulses should be restricted. Understood? So therefore, when we increase the exports, it's a good thing. Why? Because it brings us injections. Injections means it brings injections into the economy, means it will bring more forex into the economy. What does that mean? That when my good will go into Africa, it will bring revenue from there into our economy, which means that my economy will start growing because the money supply in the economy is increasing. When the money supply in the economy is increasing, it means my economic activity will increase. Simple. Now, this person A, he is getting some money from Africa by exporting a good of say 1 lakh rupees. And he is getting these 1 lakh, say dollars, not rupees, say dollars, he is getting these $1 lakh from Africa. But out of this $1 lakh, whenever he exports, he has to pay $10,000 as tax to government. This goes to government in India. Simple. Do you remember the basics of circular flow of economy or circular flow of money? Basic of circular flow of money was that there were households, and there were firms. These households will supply what? Labor. These households will also supply money. These firms will supply wages, and these firms will supply goods and services. Now let's understand this. It is very simple concept. In economy, we say that in the initial times, or the basic model of circular flow of economy, circular flow of money says one simple thing, that when we see a transaction at the core of it, it is a transaction between household and a firm, a private player. And this household is giving his labor, excess labor, or he is paying, say for example, I want to purchase this earphone from someone. Say for example, this is Apple earphone, I want to purchase it from Apple. Apple is a firm. I went to Apple, I purchased this earphone. Now what is the actual nature of this transaction? I got the good, they got the money. That's it. This is the fastest and the easiest way, and this is the highest velocity of the money, that the money is changing. It is going from me to them, and they will directly put it into use. That is a private player. He will directly start producing out of it. Do you understand? This is the closest loop of the economy. But then again, something more happens. Then we attach, say, financial institutions, we attach export and import, we attach the government into it. That government will also tax, government will provide subsidies, we will do exports and we will bring in imports, we will give money to financial institutions as savings and they will give us back loans. Now that is something which is an addition to the circular flow, and it is taking time. it is taking time for the money to circulate because the circle is getting bigger and bigger. That is why whenever an exporter is paying 10,000 to government, it is better that he pays it to government, or the better thing is he keeps it with himself. Do you understand? The best thing was that he keeps it with himself and uses it, because we want to increase the exports more and more. Now understand this, just understand this. He gave 10,000 rupees to government. Government used these 10,000 rupees to start building ports. Now these ports will take 10 years, 20 years to build. Then these ports will take 20 more years. Then exporters and importers will start settling, ships will come and trade will happen, and that port infrastructure, it's a big thing and a big project. It will take say 20 or 30 years to establish. Simple. That is one thing. Second thing was leaving these 10,000 with this person only and managing on its own. Government will manage on its own and start building infrastructure through other resources. Say it will take a loan from outside. Do you understand? How will exports increase more quickly? That is by leaving this money with the exporter. That is why we introduced export scripts. What were those export scripts? That whenever a person exports anything, whenever I export this good, I paid a tax. Now government will issue me the receipt of that tax and I will go and rebate that money. This money will be given back to me, which I paid in the form of taxes. Still, it used to take time. The money of the exporters used to keep on pending. That money used to keep on pending, and that rebate was given say months after months, say after 6 months or after 1 year. That is a problem, and that problem had to be solved in order to increase more and more exports. Simple. That is why we introduced reforms in the form of a RoDTEP scheme. We introduced reforms in the form of IGST. Multiple reforms have been introduced so that we get or we give the exporters that tax money back, so that exports keep on increasing. Because I said that our exports are better for us, and the imports which we are doing are somewhat taking a share from Indian economy to the outside economy. Understood? Simple? Sure. Now that was all about trade. Now before we begin the lecture further, or before we move further deep into the lecture and understand every bit in detail, I would like to announce over here that you all have been following these lectures. The thing that if you are preparing for any exam and you want a quick revision of Indian economic concepts for prelims, or say for example for any one-day exam, you should directly do one thing. Go to this, scan this QR code, go to the lecture. It's a 9-hour lecture and all the economic concepts have been discussed, from starting microeconomics to last agriculture and export sector. Everything has been explained in this one single, I would say, marathon. Understood? Next. Next we have all the PYQs of UPSC which have been discussed in one single marathon. That is a 3.5-hour marathon. You can go watch this marathon and then revise all the PYQs. Once you do all the PYQs of prelims, then only you will understand that which are the areas where I should focus more. Simple. One more thing which you should remember is very simple, that economy has been simplified for you through these 2 marathons which I talked about. But there is one more thing which you should keep on focusing always and always, that is, do not skip NCERTs. There is a document of 120 pages which I have prepared myself, and you can get this document just by doing one thing. Either you join this WhatsApp group, or you join the Telegram, which is for now on pause, or you directly ping me over here on email or on my phone number. I'll share you this document. This is a 120-page document under which the chapters of NCERT have been arranged in a manner that you understand economics. See, for example, there are 2 chapters from 6th class NCERT, 1 chapter from 9th, 1 from 10th, 2 from 12th, and the last from 12th. So therefore, you need to understand that why are these being clubbed together. Why are these being clubbed together? Because they all represent only one concept. That is why the NCERT has been divided from 6th class to 12th class under 8 themes. Only 8 themes, 120 pages. Once you go through this, you will be done with NCERTs. You will be done with economy. Your 50% of the economy will be done. and that too with a solid core foundation. Done? You have any other doubts, you can ping me over here. Simple. Moving ahead. On this email ID. Chalo. Now, let's start. What was the core objective of industrial policy of India? The core objective is very simple, that we will do industrial development. How will we do industrial development? By the establishment and efficient management of industries with the socio-economic goals to be achieved. Structural transformation, how will it be achieved? By introducing competitiveness through technology and trade policies, and also inclusive growth, that all the sectors should be included. All the sectors should be included, all the sections of the society should be included, whether these are women, vulnerable sections, children, orphans, old age, everyone should have the benefits of the growth of India. Simple. Now we started with the first industrial policy resolution of 1948. Under this industrial policy resolution, we had three things which were on focus. First was state monopoly. What does that mean? That all the arms, Hathiyar, defense system, ammunition, atomic energy and railway, transport will be under central government's control. These sectors will be clearly under central government's control. There will be no private participation. Second, the basic industries. What are these basic industries? 6 basic industries were there, which were exclusively under state responsibility for new undertakings. That all the new undertakings will be provided, all the new undertakings will be state only. There will be PSUs only which will be introduced. Private enterprises, all the other fields will be given to private enterprises, and there will be very less state participation in all the other private enterprises. Only 6 of the industries will be provided or will be kept only for state control or only for PSUs. So therefore, this policy was presented by Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. This resolution emphasized on states' progressive active role in securing the continuous production and increase in equitable distribution. Simple. These are 3 points which you should remember about industrial policy resolution, because that is the only thing which we will be writing in our mains answer. Only 2 or 3 points. Not more than that. There will not be an entire answer on one single thing, that is industrial policy resolution of 1948. There won't be a full question on only one policy. That is why I given you only 3 or 4 points about everything. Simple. Understood? So therefore, under this policy resolution of 1956, industrial policy resolution 1956, this was presented along the Nehru-Mahalanobis model, growth model. Do you remember this was followed under second 5-year plan? Do you remember that? That this industrial policy resolution was provided, and we discussed it already. This is built on the foundation of scarce capital, limited entrepreneurship. Means what? That India at that point of time was having scarcity of capital. We didn't have that much of capital. So therefore, in order to increase the capital, in order to understand that we have too much of, say, wants, we have too much of needs, we have too many mouths to fill, we have too much of demand at the local sector. We need to understand that how industrial, why was this brought in? Because second 5-year plan had its entire focus on what? Industries only, na? The focus was on industries only, second 5-year plan. That is why this was brought in. And the only thing which it, I would say first accepted was that there is a problem with India's resources. We have scarce capital. Further, this policy aimed to accelerate growth. Now, how will it accelerate economic growth? By providing what? By providing for industrialization and socialistic pattern of society. That is what we discussed already. Simple. So what was the main principle of this plan or of this policy? First, the state assumed predominant and direct responsibility for industrial development, making a decisive shift in India's economic approach, that it will be entirely the responsibility of the state, of the government, that we will develop the industrial sector. Further, after 1956 industrial policy, now do you remember we discussed that the first phase of industrial policy was from 1947 to 1970s. After 1970s, the policy will change. Now, how will the policy change? Industrial policy statement of 1973. First thing, strategic industries were consolidated. the list of basic, critical and strategic industries with long-term export potential. Those industries which have long-term export potential, they will be focused on. Just like as now currently at this point of time, the government is focusing on what? Critical minerals, rare earth corridors, because those are the industries of future. Those are the industries from where we will see our growth. Understood? MRTP restrictions are there. The Monopolies Restriction Trade Policy Act, this was brought in. Large industrial houses which defined by asset values face license restrictions under MRTP Act 1969. Now this act was brought in to ensure that the apprehensions of the government get solved. Say for example, we had a belief system that if we let private sector to boom, if we let private sector to have all its profit, at this juncture we will again see growth of one big corporate who will have large influence on the government and it will start controlling the government. That is what we had because East India Company did the same thing. So we brought in this Act of Monopolies, MRTP Act, Monopolies Restrictions and Trade Policies Act, just to make sure that the monopolies or monopolistic trade practices are restricted in India in 1969 so that we allow private players to prosper. The preference was given to small and medium enterprises over the large houses and foreign companies. Now, the preference shifted towards whom? Small and medium enterprises, SME. Even currently we are focused on micro, small and medium enterprises. Then comes the Industrial Policy Statement of 1977. This policy statement, again the focus was on tiny industries, small scale industries. The focus was that public sector expansion, the increased public sector role with provisions for revival of sick units, that all those public sector units, all those PSUs which are not making profit should be now revived. We should give them more capital, we should refinance them, we should inject more capital into them. Then only we will understand that how and why are they not working. Consumer protection was mainly focused on. It restricted the big houses to prevent monopolistic exploitation. The direct industries centers, DICs, if you do not know, you can directly check that what is your district industrial sector and where is it located. You will also find that in every district we have a district industrial center which actually coordinates the industrial development of the entire district. There is industrial land also which is allocated in every district where industries are allowed or industries are given land so that they develop. These are one-stop service centers for industries. Next policy statement came in 1980s. Now you will also see that post 1980s, now there will be a bit of liberalization or a bit of privatization which will increase. And state's role in doing the business will decrease, rather it will help in industries to increase their capacity. So therefore, what happened here? That we started to increase the capacity utilization. What is capacity utilization? That is optimum use of installed capacity for maximum production. Which means what? Increasing your output by increasing the efficiency. Do you remember that we discussed production possibility frontier, PPF? We discussed it in our initial classes, that what production possibility frontier says is that wherever the actual growth you have, whatever the actual growth you currently are having, it is less than the potential what you have. So therefore, in order to achieve your potential growth, you need to utilize your capacity more. You need to have better capacity utilization, and that is how government started focusing on capacity utilization. Also, employment and balance. Higher employment generation and correction of regional imbalances so that we increase the employment. Agricultural base strengthening through agro-based industries. Now till now we were focused on what? that we need to increase the produce of agriculture, we need to increase the produce of agriculture, we need to increase agricultural production. But now the focus is on what? Increasing the productivity of the agriculture. Farm mechanization, increasing industrial input, increasing the backward and forward linkage of industries with respect to agriculture. Simple. Export and federalism, that is, all the states should be in a competitive and cooperative manner when it comes to industries, and increasing the exports of India. Understood? Post 1980s, then came this consensus from 1970 onwards. Wildlife Protection Act was also formed 1976. Now comes the consensus, Environment Protection Act 1986. Now comes the consensus that we need to focus on green development also, we need to focus on environment also, we need to focus on greening of the economy, we need to focus on saving our planet. Land degradation, agricultural deforestation should be stopped. Land reclamation and focusing on green energy, focusing on green sectors of development. Now this policy was brought in 1980s. So the innovations in the 1980 policy, that is green dimensions and economic federalism, for the first time the industrial policy incorporated environmental considerations. 1980s may also. In the 5-year plans also this was included, that we will focus on greening of economy, environmental considerations will be taken care of. Simple. The alternative energy resources received special assistance and concessional finances. The concept of economic federalism was introduced. Nucleus plants in backward districts which would assemble products from ancillary units, produce inputs for smaller units and upgrade their technology, which means what? That there will be a proper supply chain from one industry to another industry to another industry, that the output of one will be used as input of another, and then this supply chain will go on, and there will be, or I would say, the concept of circular economy was an infirmity right now. Still, we were conceptualizing on that. Economic federalism also. There shouldn't be, I would say, there shouldn't be restrictions between the districts, between the states, between the federal units of the nation. Understood? So new industrial policy from 1991 onwards will change the paradigm, or there will be a paradigm shift in the industrial development of India from 1991 onwards. And tomorrow we will finish this chapter. From here onwards we will pick up it tomorrow. It will be a 30 minutes lecture and we will be done with this chapter also. Post that we will take next chapter, and with this we will complete the economics, the book of economics, I think mostly by the end of next month. Okay? July or August, 15th of the August we will have our, the book of the economics will be completed on, most tentatively on 15th of August. Okay? By 15th of August we will be done with this book. Till then, I wish you all the best. Thank you for being here. Jai Hind.